Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. The death toll in Hawaii rises to more than 50 people as wildfires rip through two of the islands. Plus, Ottawa in cleanup and dry out mode today after heavy rains leave some areas with 3 feet of flooding. And Lethbridge's Agri-Food and Hub Trade Center officially opens its doors. We take you on a tour.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. Residents across the Hawaiian island of Maui are beginning to sift through the rubble of their communities following the devastating wildfires this week. At least 55 people have been killed, and officials say the death toll will likely rise. Firefighters are still working to put out the active fire that raced through the historic town of Lahaina. It's destroying everything in its path. Search and rescue teams from California and Washington state have been deployed to Maui to help. Some residents are staying in shelters and say they have nothing left after a blaze decimated their homes. Many houses that used to be in lush areas with huge banyan trees are now reduced to a landscape of gray and black. And according to Associated Press, Lahaina residents had little warning prior to the fires. Hawaii emergency management records show indication that warning sirens sounded before people ran for their lives from the flames. Instead, officials sent alerts to mobile phones, TV, and radio stations, but widespread power and cellular outages may have limited their reach. The wildfires were fueled by a dry summer and strong winds from a passing hurricane racing through parched brush covering the island. This is the state's deadliest natural disaster since a 1960 tsunami killed 61 people. And now here's a personal testimony of the impact of the fire on Maui. Tiffany Kidder-Wynn owned a business in Lahaina. She went to survey the damage and check in on her business, and this is what she saw.
As I walked, though, it started getting worse, power lines down, and then started to see smoke. And there was smoke everywhere, but it was getting thicker, and cars burned, and apartment complexes burned. And the further we got on the Front Street, the more devastating it was. Just everything leveled, but not just Front Street, it's everywhere. Looking up the hillside, all the homes are gone, all the buildings are gutted. It looks like a war zone, like from just total destruction. To our knowledge, 3 folks who didn't make it, and some, animals, people's pets, things like that. It was really heartbreaking.
Yeah, that truly is heartbreaking. From fire to water now, the city of Ottawa is in cleanup mode today. Recent heavy rainfall flooded roads and disrupted traffic on Thursday as severe storms moved across the Canadian capital. Environment Canada issued a severe thunderstorm warning, alerting residents of the possibility of flash flooding. It was reported that more than 50 millimeters or 2 inches of rain was recorded shortly after the downfall began. But by the time it was all said and done, between 31.5 and 100 millimeters of rain fell across the city, with the neighborhoods of Carlton Heights and the Riverside area seeing near 100 millimeters of rain. Streets became canals and thousands were left without power. And more storms than average are expected in the Atlantic Ocean this hurricane season, which means there's a greater chance one could hit Canada. Chris Fogarty with the Canadian Hurricane Center says the main reason for the new forecast from U.S. officials is higher than normal ocean temperatures. He says warmer water could help storms keep their intensity over a longer period of time in eastern Canada. The season officially runs from June 1st till November 30th. The federal government predicts that high wildfire activity will continue across much of Canada this month, with the potential for the fire season to extend into September for southern BC, the Prairies, Northwest Territories, and Western Ontario. Federal officials gave a briefing today on the outlook for what's already been an unprecedented wildfire season. More than 130,000 square kilometers have been charred to date. That's more than 6 times the 10-year average. Natural Resources Minister Minister Jonathan Wilkinson is announcing $400,000 in funding for a pilot project that will train 25 instructors on how to deliver consistent and effective wildfire response training. Fires claimed the lives of 4 firefighters who died this summer while battling blazes. The records of more than 1.4 million Alberta residents were the target of a cyber attack. That's according to the Alberta Dental Service Corporation, that says a third party gained unauthorized access to parts of its information technology infrastructure last month. The government service provider says that a third party was able to obtain some personal information about people enrolled in provincial government health benefit programs as well as health providers. ADSC says it will contact the affected Albertans directly, including those whose banking information was accessed. And a special flag raising took place this morning to honor Hong Kong veterans who were prisoners of war during World War II. The Hong Kong Veterans Commemorative Association told us they're celebrating VJ Day, which pays tribute to the end of the war in the Pacific and remembers the Canadian veterans who fought in the Battle of Hong Kong in 1941 and were liberated on August 15th in 1945. The regiments were the Winnipeg Grenadiers and the Royal Rifles. Kathy Carlson, a member of the group and a daughter to a POW, was asked if any of the survivors talked about their time in captivity during the war.
A lady her father had passed recently, and she came to this convention. We used to meet every 2 years. And she said, she went from table to table, and she said, I found this box. It had a little sort of a notes that her dad had kept, a few little things that were significant to him. She said, I didn't even know that he was there. He never said. And that is typically every father that we've ever heard about never told any of us. And my father was no exception.
Carlson says the last remaining Hong Kong POW veteran from that liberation lives in Nova Scotia and is 106 years old. The group is also celebrating their 30th anniversary this year. Some exciting news for Lethbridge. The agri-food hub and trade center has been in the making for more than 20 years now. That dream has become a reality now. The center had its grand opening on Thursday after more than 2 years of construction. A special ceremony was held with local, provincial, and federal dignitaries providing speeches. Video journalist Micah Quinn has more on the new center, which is expected to contribute more than $90 million annually to the regional economy.
With the cut of a ribbon and the raising of the Blackfoot Confederacy flag, the new Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center is now officially open. According to Mike Workington, the CEO of the Lethbridge and District Exhibition, the project cost $76.6 million to complete.
There's 268,000 total square feet in this facility, 104,000 square feet of 4 trade halls. There's 4 meeting rooms that are all about 1,100 square feet each. There's 3 salon banquet rooms that total a little over 13,000 square feet. There's a 6,000 square foot gala space, as well as obviously all of this public space that we're standing in now. This facility gives us the opportunity is to focus on provincial events coming in, national events, and we're dipping our toe into bidding on international events to come here to Lethbridge in Southern Alberta.
RJ Sigurdsson, the Alberta Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation, says the provincial government contributed $27.8 million to the center.
The Agri-Food Hub and Exhibition Center that is opening right now is a huge potential for the area to be able to showcase agriculture and agri-food in Southern Alberta and for the province as a whole. The globe is going to be coming here, taking a look at what Alberta has to offer, and I think because of that, we're going to see an incredible investment in our province in the future.
Staff with the Lethbridge and District Exhibition explained to us that nearly 300,000 hours of trades work have gone into construction of the new center, with Alberta contractors providing 100% of that labor. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Alberta's police watchdog says it's looking into the death of a man who died after being arrested in Medicine Hat. The Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, or ASIRT, says city police were called to an apartment on Sunday about a man screaming and swinging a machete. ASIRT says after police told the man he was under arrest for possession of a weapon and for a dangerous purpose, he barricaded himself inside before coming out holding a machete and a knife. The agency says officers deployed non-lethal rounds and restrained the 44-year-old man, who later died in hospital. The Transportation Safety Board is investigating after a plane crashed near the town of High River, Alberta. RCMP say the two people on board the single-engine prop plane suffered serious injuries in the crash yesterday afternoon. The plane crashed in a field near the High River Regional Airport, which is around 45 kilometers south of Calgary and 152 kilometers north of Lethbridge. The ambulatory care clinic at Picture Butte's Piami Health Center will be closing effective October 15th. With its impending closure, AHS is working to recruit 2 physicians to the community to support primary care in the area. The community of Picture Butte has been served by the Piami Health Center for more than 15 years. AHS is working hard to ensure local residents continue to have access to the care they need. An investigation by the Auditor General has found Ontario's decision to open up the protected green belt to housing construction favored certain developers with ties to the housing ministry and failed to consider the potential consequences of the move. Premier Doug Ford acknowledged that the process of determining which parts of the green belt to develop were, quote, they should have been better, but said his government would not reverse course, insisting that building in the area was crucial to achieving housing targets.
Rather than allow the housing ministry's non-political public service staff to conduct a comprehensive process with expert review to identify and select lands for possible removal from the Greenbelt, the government assigned responsibility for this important assignment to political staff. The housing minister's chief of staff, who led and controlled a truncated, highly restricted selection exercise for the removal of lands from the Greenbelt. More troubling still, the process was biased in favor of certain developers and landowners who had timely access to the housing minister's chief of staff. Owners of the 15 land sites removed from the Greenbelt could ultimately see more than a collective $8.3 billion increase to the value of their properties.
Housing supply crisis, it's a severe crisis, and our severity required us to act quickly. I acknowledge the recommendations in the Auditor General's report that indicate that we need to make some changes. I respect that. I agree with those recommendations, and I will implement them.
The report says what was done wrong. The process should have been better, and I'm admitting the process should have been better. But when you're in a housing crisis, when you have an inferno happening, you know, the firefighters run to the fire. They don't run away from it. In my position, I have to deal with the crisis.
Ford said he is not backing away from plans to build on the protected Greenbelt, adding that no one got preferential treatment in the process to open up 7,400 acres of land to housing construction. Canada's Minister of Defence has inherited a military in the midst of change. Bill Blair says his top priority as Defence Minister is changing the culture of the Canadian Armed Forces. He says toxic elements like intolerance and discrimination are not part of the military's culture, but need to be removed.
Some of that culture, some of that history has been very positive. The commitment to service, the commitment to put yourself in harm's way and in the service of others. In the acceptance of that responsibility, I think there's a long and proud tradition in the Canadian Armed Forces and something that we want to retain. And at the same time, I think there is, this was an organization in its historical development, which was an organization run by men, for men, and now the Canadian Armed Forces, quite appropriately, is evolving into a far more diverse organization where there's a significant role for women, for example. And in some of the decisions that have recently been made to open up the applications for recruitment among permanent residents. That's clearly, I think, going to be very effective in helping us attract an even more diverse workforce. And that's going to make the Canadian Forces more effective operationally.
In February of this year, Turkey suffered a catastrophic earthquake that left affected areas in absolute shambles. Today, Samaritan's Purse is there providing for the needs of survivors during a time of extreme summer heat.
We are in Antakya, Turkey, which is approximately 12 hours southeast of Istanbul and only 30 miles from the Syrian border. We are approaching 6 months after the devastating February 6th earthquake. Since the immediate earthquake, where the weather was extremely cold, now we've shifted to summer, where temperatures soar toward 100 degrees. It's extremely hot, extremely windy. There's a significant amount of dust in the air constantly. Right now, we're in the final phases of our summerization project, which is to make the tents more livable in the extreme summer conditions. Samaritan's Purse is distributing 21,000 units of refrigerators, fans, and shade kits. Samaritan's Purse is here in Antakya, Turkey, working with our partner, First Hope Association. One of the key people we're working with is Hassan, who is the project coordinator on the ground.
İnsanların yaşamlarını kolaylaştırmak, rahatlatmak için buradayız. Onlara yardım etmek için buradayız. İnsanların yaşamında Tanrı'nın sevgisini göstermek için.
He has this ability to relate to the people, especially to the children. The children gravitate toward him. He really cares about the quality of the work we're doing and just the overall plight of the people. You know, it sits in his heart.
The reason that we're still here in Turkey is because of the huge need of so many people that have lost their lives. And you can imagine how many families are suffering because of that. They've lost their home. The reason that we're still here is to try to help them in any way that we can. Through the summarization project is what we're involved with right now.
We can see it in the eyes of the people as we bring this relief to them. Just the sheer joy in their eyes, the relief in their eyes, the thankfulness in their eyes. It tells us a lot.
Wow, it's incredible the work they're doing and in that intense heat too. Speaking of heat, it was a gorgeous sunny day in Lethbridge today with a high of 28 degrees. Now that weather is about to get back to the 30s next week, but not before we see a cooler day Saturday, and it could also bring some rain with it. I'll be right back with a full look at weather. Welcome back. In Lethbridge, it looks like we're experiencing a few clouds this evening overnight. Low of 10 degrees. As we get into Saturday, we're seeing mainly sunny skies in the morning, and then those clouds are going to increase throughout the afternoon. We're looking at late afternoon showers, about 30%, 24 degrees rather on a Saturday, and as we get into Sunday, lots of sunshine, 26 for a high. As we start the work week next week, we're seeing highs of 33 on Monday, 32 on Tuesday, with lots of sunshine, 31 degrees on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, 29 degrees. So it's going to get a lot warmer next week. So we're definitely still in summer, everyone. 26 for average high for this time of year, average low 11.37 was our record high on this day back in 1996, and in 2007 it was only 0. Sun rose this morning at 6:16. We're looking at a sunset this evening at 8:56. We're now in that 8 o'clock hour. 14 hours and 40 minutes is what it leaves us with for the amount of daylight. Okay, fairly clear skies on the west coast tomorrow. Victoria looking at a high of 23, light winds, 40k winds though in the Juan de Fuca Strait. As we get to Vancouver, 23. Further inland, about 5 degrees higher for a high of 28 degrees, clear skies. Edmonton seeing a 30% chance of showers in the morning and afternoon, high of 23 degrees. Calgary, afternoon showers, 22 for a high there. As we get into the rest of the prairies, Saskatoon looking at a 60% chance of showers, risk of a thunderstorm, high of 21 degrees, 23 for a high. In Regina, mix of sun and cloud, and Winnipeg also seeing that chance of showers. As we get into the central part of the country, we are seeing a little bit more precipitation there as well. Toronto expecting 5 millimeters of rain tomorrow with the risk of a thunderstorm. Also very windy, up to 50k winds around noon, 25 for a high. Ottawa is trying to dry out today from that horrible storm that they saw on Thursday. They should be expecting a few more showers on Saturday, and that risk of a thunderstorm as well. High of 21 degrees there, 24 for a high in Montreal, and Montreal could see some afternoon showers as well. We're looking at a severe thunderstorm watch in Fredericton this evening. High of 23 tomorrow, though. Tomorrow, not as much rain. Looking at a mix of sun and cloud and mainly clear skies expected tomorrow in Halifax. High of 24 degrees. 21 for a high in Charlottetown. Looking at heavy rains tomorrow, even though the graphic doesn't show it. We are looking at 20 to 30 millimeters of rain and some embedded thunderstorms there as well. 22 for a high in St. John's tomorrow. Looking at 5 millimeters of rain, 15 millimeters in the areas heaviest hit and could see a risk of a thunderstorm as well. Also up to 60K winds there. So there you have it. That is your forecast. Data from rentals.ca and research from Urbanation found the average asking rent in Canada hit a new record in July at $2,078 per month. The total asking rent is 8.9% higher than a year earlier. It's also 21% higher than the average asking rent in July of 2021, an increase of about $354 per month. The increase is being attributed to a surge in post-secondary students signing leases before the fall, unprecedented levels of population growth, and home buyers holding off on purchases as interest rates have risen. Air Canada saw profits soar in its most recent quarter amid high fares and demand. Despite problems with flight delays, the country's largest airline posted a net income of $838 million for the quarter ending June 30th. It's a roaring return from losses for all of 2022, which totaled close to $1 billion. CEO Michael Rosso says strong demand resulted in 11 million customers in the quarter, while analysts noted higher tickets prices behind the thicker profit margins. Unifor National President Lana Payne emphasized that auto workers expect to make significant wage and benefit gains as the union kicked off contract talks with the Detroit Three. The official handshakes that started negotiations between the union and the three automakers come as the rising cost of living and the transition to electric vehicles are top of mind.
I made it very clear to the companies today that our members' expectations are very high. Indeed, all workers' expectations throughout Canada are very high. And for good reason. Profits are up, and so is the cost of living. Workers have shown time and time again that they are prepared to fight and to strike, if necessary, to have their demands met. This is the moment we are in, and no one should underestimate it.
And now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 64 points on the day to finish at 20,407. The Dow is up 105 points to 35,281. The S&P 500 was down 4 points to 4464, and the Nasdaq was down 93 points on the day to finish at 13,644. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 25 cents to 83.07 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 2 cents to 278 US. Gold was up $1.28 to 1913.76 US an ounce, and silver was down 2 cents to 22.69 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $10.42 per bushel. Barley is at $8.21, canola is at $17.38, and corn is at $9.75 per bushel. Live cattle were down 73 cents to 180.38. Feeder cattle were down 25 cents to 247.75. Lean hogs were up 38 cents to 102.10, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.41 US.
Recapping one of our top stories today, Lahaina residents had little warning prior to the wildfires that ripped across the island of Maui this week. Hawaii emergency management records show no indication that warning sirens sounded before people ran for their lives from the flames. At least 55 people have been killed, and officials say the death toll will likely rise. The wildfires were fueled by a dry summer and strong winds from a passing hurricane. Cheryl Seaborn is a nurse who also sought to win the Lethbridge West riding during the last Alberta election. She ultimately lost to the NDP incumbent Shannon Phillips, but Seaborn says she's still fighting to ensure that people in Lethbridge have their health care needs met. We'll hear from her with Hal Roberts right after the break. And if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's stories, be sure to visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
The last Alberta provincial election saw a number of surprises, including certain cabinet ministers who were not re-elected, including Tyler Shandro, Josephine Pon, and Jason Copping. Daniel Smith and her party ended up getting a majority government, but it wasn't by a landslide like we saw back in 2019. Cheryl Seaborn ran for the UCP in Lethbridge West, and she lost to the incumbent, the NDP Shannon Phillips, by around 2,500 votes. Cheryl is a married mom, 5 kids, 6 grandkids, as a nurse, business owner, and has called Lethbridge home for about 25 years. As Cheryl joins us now from Lethbridge. Cheryl, welcome to Bridge City News.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here with you.
Cheryl, let's talk about the whole experience of running to become an MLA here in Lethbridge. Now, you came in only 7 weeks before the election when Tory Tanner stepped aside as the UCP candidate. That must have been challenging for you, so close to the election.
Yes, it definitely presents challenges. Of course, getting out there and getting to know people is probably the biggest challenge that I had. And so that's really the biggest challenge, is to be able to get out and get to know people as quickly as you want to.
Yeah, people get to know you at the same time, like who is Cheryl Seaborn, what is she all about, where does she stand on a number of issues, and how will she best represent me at the legislature? So Cheryl, looking back, what do you think you really learned during your campaign, you and your team?
Well, I learned that the people of Lethbridge are pretty awesome. That's one thing that really stood out to me as I door knocked, as I met with people, as I met with groups of people that requested visits with us, or as I was able to go to businesses and meet with business people and employees there. I learned about how invested people are in our community. I learned about how people are passionate about the things that are happening, the things that affect them and impact them, and the concerns that they had. And overall, just that we really do have a wonderful community of wonderful people, and who are really interested in having what's best for the community, for Alberta. And so that was a pleasure, actually. And in fact, I would say many people have asked me about my experience, even with the loss. And honestly, I can't say anything other than it was really an awesome experience. Even though the end result wasn't what I'd hoped for, it was an awesome experience.
But looking back, let's talk about maybe things you and your team would have done a little differently through this journey.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I think I would want to do, even if I had a little bit longer time, is to bring more people together. I think that knocking on doors is great. You miss a lot of people when you knock on doors, though. I mean, we knocked on over 20,000 doors. Like, we actually, in a very short amount of time, I had a wonderful team of young people. We had a lot of great success in that way, and we're successful in many ways, but you don't get to meet everybody. And I think that bringing people together and hearing their views in town hall type of things, I think would have been very advantageous, actually. It gives you an opportunity to visit with people and get them to know you, which is really what's important, is for people to get to know me and to know what I stand for and how I would represent them, and really get a sense of that, like a feel of that. Sending out literature is great. Billboards are great. It shows people who you are by how you look, but it doesn't really tell people who you are and what you represent personally. And then also the opportunity then to have people ask you questions, right? Ask you questions and find out more information. And that's a two-way thing. You get to see where people stand on issues. You also get the opportunity to help people to get to know you better. And so I think actually that's something I would have done differently. I would have brought groups together and had more. I think that would have had more of an impact. That's very retrospective, right? Always 20/20 vision. But when you have such a short period of time, that would have been very beneficial to do something like that.
What were some of the biggest issues you heard while door knocking? I guess maybe the doctor shortage came up right to the surface?
Yeah, for sure. Healthcare in general came to the surface. There was a lot of misinformation, as we're all aware of, that was coming out during that campaign period. And so trying to allay some fears that people had about healthcare, specific to Lethbridge, of course, physician shortages is a big thing. Without question, that was a big thing for people, for constituents. And then, of course, that follows in line. We went to the Canada Pension Plan. We went to cost of living. People were very concerned about, cost of rent. The seniors particularly very concerned about their cost of living, cost of rent, those types of issues as well.
So Cheryl, as a registered nurse, what are your thoughts about the doctor shortage here in our region? There are still tens of thousands of people here in Lethbridge without a family physician.
Yeah, it is such a challenging and really complex issue. And I don't say that to make light of it or to try to brush it aside. It is a complex issue. Physicians are their own business. They make their own decisions about where they plan to live and to work. And that's based on lots of different things. What we do see is that physicians tend to, when they graduate medical school, they tend to go to areas where they have bigger centers. So, those bigger urban hospitals that offer many different types of services. And so they tend to kind of gravitate towards those areas. And so the trick really is for places like us, in Southern Alberta, is what are we going to do to make us that type of a center? I think the United Conservative Party is has been prior to the election and continues to make strides in that way and trying to make Chinook Hospital an area where we are offering more services by having, the increase in our cardiac services that we're anticipating coming. We're looking at trying to work with the University of Calgary Medical School to have our own medical school down here in Lethbridge. We certainly have the population in the South Zone to be able to accommodate something like that. We need the political will, and we need the university to support something like that. And it would be a huge move for them to do so. And a huge, that's a long-term plan, right? To get doctors is a long-term plan, but we have to have a short-term, mid-term, and long-term plan in order to do something like that.
And it's not just the doctors, but let's talk about some of the specialists, the needs here as well, like obstetricians, cardiologists. We need so many more people coming to our region here to help us out.
Absolutely. So certainly having a cath lab will help cardiologists to come this way. And you have to start somewhere, right? You start with that, and then you build on that kind of a service. And then you look at other specialties that are associated with the cardiac area. And then you can build on that to trauma, and you can build in those ways. So you have to start one place at a time and focus on one place at a time. Obstetricians, again, that's a complex situation. We have to do things to be able to encourage physicians to want to come to this area. We certainly have lots of babies born in this area, but besides babies, we have lots of needs. The women in this area have lots of other gynecological needs that need to be met. And currently, we have lots of physicians that are stepping up and doing the best that they can, but it really is not sufficient. There's no denying that, and we need to find ways to bring those obstetricians and attract them to areas like Lethbridge.
You're obviously still in contact with a lot of people within the party itself, within the UCP. Where do we stand right now? What are your thoughts regarding decentralizing EMS and improving ambulance response times? That was also a big election issue.
It was a big election issue. Improving EMS response times has actually been something that we've seen measurable. So the data supports that we are improving those times. Those were issues particularly in the urban centers. So like Lethbridge, for sure, Calgary, for sure, Edmonton, those were just huge issues there. And there's no question that we're seeing that has improved, and that's been a very measurable improvement. And that overall, it increases patient safety, right? That's a patient safety issue. And in healthcare, sometimes we get tied up a little bit in how much does that cost? Or what does that process look like? And we have to remember the humanness in healthcare. And that's something that really I very much advocate for is, at the end of the day, what is the best thing for the person that needs that care? Are we doing the best thing for that person? And I think that EMS piece has really focused on that, and that's been a great thing. Certainly, I work in rural AHS medicine, and we've seen very much an increase in support. Our EMS are wonderful in the rurals, and they work very well together as a team with the various rural sites. And so that's an area that has already been working very well and continues to improve over time.
Cheryl, what are your thoughts on the Marda Loop Health Clinic in Southwest Calgary that was going to be charging $2,000 per individual, like a membership fee, to be able to get access to a doctor a lot faster, and maybe $4,000 per family? People were simply outraged by that, and they since pulled back since the province kind of pushed them on it and said, well, we're going to audit you guys here. But what are your thoughts on that? Health clinics doing stuff like that?
Yeah, you can't. I mean, it's not acceptable from the Canada Health Act. We aren't able to charge people to receive any type of care that you can get through our public health, right? Like any kind of service that we can, that is accessible through public health, we can't charge for, so people can have really what would amount to an increased ability to get that help over someone else. And so it really was an inappropriate thing. I think that Premier Smith spoke very quickly to that and said it's unacceptable and it can't be done. And that was the appropriate thing to do. We can't see that happening at this time at all. Yeah, it's just an inappropriate method of trying to get people in to see physicians faster, or in a way that makes them seem able to access above and beyond the rest of us who maybe can't afford that kind of money to access healthcare. So
how important is it for people to actively engage in local politics to really influence healthcare policies and decisions?
You know, it's important in order to be involved in everything, I would suggest, not just healthcare. People need to become far more involved, get to know who's representing them, like deeply get to know, is this person actually representing me? What are their values? Do they align with the things that I believe in? Do they align with what needs to happen in the province? And then reach out to them regularly. You know, I hear people that say, you know, I've reached out to my MLA, they're not responding. Don't stop.
So Cheryl, how can local politicians collaborate with healthcare experts to address a lot of the community-specific healthcare challenges?
Yeah, so I think that we're going to have to, you know, some of that has been happening. It happened with Minister Copping when he was the health minister about a year ago. He started doing healthcare tours and actually reaching out to healthcare professionals and asking them, you know, what we thought was the most important criteria, how we can engage more with what's going on locally and on the local level. And I think that that's a really great start. I think that that MLAs have a part to play in that, in reaching out to people, but really the health minister needs to be actively engaged throughout the province to see what are healthcare professionals saying that are actually seeing what's going on in the front line, and then addressing those concerns appropriately.
And what strategies can MLAs really employ to ensure healthcare accessibility for marginalized or underserved populations? Cheryl, what do you think?
Yeah, and so, you know, that's a really critical issue, and it's a critical issue particularly for Lethbridge. We have many of those people, our homeless population, people with mental health and addictions, that really do not receive likely adequate or any healthcare in some circumstances. And that, again, is a very complex question. It's not one that has a one answer, but MLAs need to be actively engaged, probably with not just provincially, but with what's going on in communities. So the municipality needs to be involved in that as well. So we need to be reaching out to our mayors to find out what's going on the ground in their view. Certainly in Lethbridge, we do have, you know, we make efforts with mobile sites to be able to offer healthcare. We have Indigenous liaisons and Indigenous wellness core built within Alberta Health Services to help with that portion of the population who also seem to not get appropriate health care all the time for themselves. And we need to be able to connect that a little bit better. There's lots of complications in different areas, but a lot of it just comes through collaboration and discussion and trying to understand what's going on with leadership and what's going on the ground.
So Cheryl, what steps can constituents really take to hold their elected representatives accountable for their promises and actions related to healthcare?
Yeah, so constituents need to be in touch with their MLAs on a consistent basis. So, the United Conservative Party has made promises in regards to healthcare. Healthcare needs to remain public. They are sticking with that. They said that before the election. They continue to reinforce that after the election, that public healthcare remains public healthcare. And I think Marta Loop is a great example of that. That Premier came out and said, no, it's still public healthcare. You can't be doing things like that. However, when it comes to other promises in healthcare related to ensuring that we're meeting the needs through family physicians, through getting more nurses, through getting more, occupational physiotherapists and all of those pieces. I think that, first of all, constituents need to be educated about what exactly is healthcare, what exactly are we entitled to in our healthcare system, and make sure that they are talking to their MLAs on a very regular basis. The more MLAs hear from the grassroots of the province, the more they realize this is an issue and we need to be dealing with this issue. If the majority of people are silent, then it sends a message saying, oh, this isn't really an issue that the majority of Albertans are really that concerned about. So as Albertans, we need to be very vocal and go to our MLAs and tell them exactly what's on our minds so that they realize these are the things that are important to my constituents. And I need to take these back to the health minister and to the premier and let them know. And if they're hearing that throughout the province, that's a direction, that is a directive that we're giving to the province and to the premier, saying this is important to us and we need to address it.
So Cheryl, we only have about 30 seconds left here, but I have to ask you quickly, are you going to seek the nomination for the UCP for Lethbridge West for the next election?
I've got a lot of Cheryl Seaborn signs in my garage right now.
Have to recycle. There you go. Do your part for the environment. Cheryl Seaborn was the UCP Lethbridge West candidate in the last provincial election. She's an RN, business owner, and has called Lethbridge home for the past 25 years. Cheryl, thanks so much for joining us today from Lethbridge.
Thank you so much for having me, Hal. I really appreciate being here. It's actually my honor to be here. Thank you.
The University of Lethbridge continues to train the next generation of thinkers, teachers, and builders. One area of study that may boggle the mind but also advances thought and theory in our modern world is the study of quantum physics. Joining us today to discuss the ideas and the science behind this field of study is Professor Surya Das. Professor Das, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much, Devin. Thanks for having me.
So, Professor, can you explain the fundamental principles of quantum physics in simple terms for our viewers who may not be familiar with the subject, and maybe just go into what the word quantum means, because I've heard quantum physics, quantum mechanics, quantum computing. What does all this mean? Put this into the layman's terms for us here.
Of course, I'll try my best. So, at the fundamental or the subatomic or the very tiny levels, the nature and physics works a bit differently than we see around us, which is very smooth and deterministic. At the subatomic level, nature is more probabilistic and uncertain, but that's the fundamental law of nature. Therefore, it affects everything that we see around us, like computers and what have you, like our cell phones, GPS, everything is determined by quantum mechanics. But although since it operates at a very small scale, we can't really see it with our naked eyes. So that's the fundamental nature. And quantum, the word quantum means it's related to the word quantity, because at the fundamental level, things aren't that smooth. It's always in terms of quantums, like packets of energy, packets of momentum, packets of charge, and that kind of thing. So that's the origin of the word quantum, and being ubiquitous, it's kind of applied everywhere, as it should be.
Okay, so now that we know the word quantum, can you just tell us what the purpose of studying quantum physics and quantum theories is all about?
Because, well, at least two ways of looking at it. One is to answer the fundamental questions of nature, which as human beings, we have always been curious about for thousands and thousands of years. Like, for example, where did we come from? Where are we going? What's the universe made up of? What are its constituents? And how does basically everything work? Why do we have 3 space and 4 dimensions? Why not something else? Why do you have 1 time and not 2? So these are fundamental questions that often we take for granted. But so to answer these questions, we have to invoke quantum physics because that's the fundamental thing. So if we want to ask fundamental questions, we have to go to the fundamental theories of nature or fundamental ideas. That's one way of looking at it. Other ways, like although these questions are fundamental, they have always been applicable and applied to technology. And modern technology like computers, electronics, they cannot do without quantum mechanics.
Okay.
Therefore, that's the other motivation that, fundamental physics advances may not, the advantages may not be obvious now, today, but very shortly thereafter, usually they become applicable to technology, most of them anyway.
And then how does the study of quantum sciences advance the mission of the University of Lethbridge then?
Well, University of Lethbridge is first of all a university, which means that the pursuit of knowledge, pure knowledge, just for the sake of pursuing, that's one of the tasks of the university, right? To push the frontiers of human knowledge, so to speak. So that is a very strong motivation. Also, being fundamental questions that are being or would be answered, it's going to have impact in the training of our students, the potential of our students of being useful in science and society everywhere, because this is like very good training. It would attract the best minds, very first-rate minds to this university to enhance the research reputation that it already has. But it will certainly add to that. And as we have more people, first-rate, very good scientists and everything, they will attract more students and researchers. So it's kind of a growing kind of thing. So it's going to definitely continue to enhance the university's reputation, and it's in line with the university's plan and everything.
So let's talk about quantum entanglement, because it's often been described as a spooky action at a distance. Can you explain this phenomenon and its significance in the field of quantum physics?
Yeah, so quantum entanglement, that's a great question. So entanglement is one way of thinking why quantum mechanics is so powerful and is going to affect computers, for example. It's going to make computers like billion, trillion, zillion times faster. It already is, right? And the reason is that, of course, it's more powerful than classical computers. And the power, one way of thinking of it is that the power comes from entanglement, which basically says that all the atoms or whatever the fundamental entities are, they're all linked to each other. It's very difficult to extricate one from the other. And one way of saying is like when you put things together, the sum is bigger than its parts. So entangle means, right, like since the atoms and everything can now talk to each other, they can share resources. So they can share resources, like you have it's like, instead of, 5 people working in 5 different, locations, they join forces, and then it becomes much bigger than the whole. So entanglement is one way of thinking of it, and it's very quantum, therefore. And there you go. It kind of says why quantum mechanics is powerful.
So is this how we can get faster processors? We can get larger memory cards or bigger chips of RAM in our computers?
Yeah, one can think of it that way in terms of the final, computing power. Quantum computers would work in a little bit different way. So thinking of in terms of, regular chips and RAM, we have to extend our kind of way of thinking or understanding that a little bit, because it'll have other components, quantum components, right? Like newer quantum components. But in the end, yes, it will be an immensely powerful. So it can do computations, calculations at speeds which are kind of almost unthinkable with classical computers.
Wow. Now, what are the current advancements or breakthroughs in the field of quantum physics that have the potential to revolutionize technology or our understanding of the universe?
Of course. So quantum mechanics, as I said, its fundamental works everywhere. As I mentioned, it works at the subatomic scales. It works at the fundamental universe scales as well when we look at cosmology with telescopes at very large distances, cosmic distance scales. So the advances, there has been lots of advances in the last 20 or 30 years. That's why it's often said now we're going through a second quantum revolution. The first quantum revolution was when quantum mechanics was first proposed and formulated. And the revolution includes things like lots of new results in quantum computation. Now quantum computations are closer than ever to being actually realized. There are already operational quantum computers here and there, not scaled to the extent that we would like to, but proof of principle, that they've shown that it works, right? So breakthroughs in theoretical side, like the way we can use quantum computers, breakthroughs in the actual practical side of making of quantum computers, and thirdly, when we apply quantum mechanics to the whole universe, there are lots of new results, interesting things, observations which have come in the last couple of decades. So there has been a lot of advances, and that's the reason why this is kind of the right time.
Now, quantum physics challenges our classical understanding of cause and effect. How does the concept of probabilistic behavior at the quantum level relate to determinism and the nature of reality?
Again, that's a very good question. So the complete predictability that we see around us, for example, if I drop something, it's predicted that it falls, right? It does that. Right. Or if I hit against the wall, I'll come back this side. So these are in a way of saying these are approximate things that we see. This is a kind of approximate a consequence of quantum mechanics. But if you go down to the fundamental, again, the atomic level, these things often don't work in the sense like if there's a wall there and there's an electron kind of hitting the wall over and over again, there's a 1 in a million chance it'll actually appear just on the other side. Like it'll just pass through the wall. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so that's what happens. What happens is when you look at big systems like us or this room, these spooky effects, these non-intuitive effects, kind of become smaller and smaller and smaller. There's still a little bit of chance, but that I might go on the other side, but the chance is really small. So in a way of saying is what we see around us is an approximate view of nature. The exact view is the quantum view, and that's why we call this intuition, I guess, what we see around us.
So you're talking about nature here. Can you give us a description of the 4 forces of nature and how they interact in the realm of quantum physics?
Yes, absolutely. So there are, interestingly, we see, we can say there are lots of forces in nature. We see, a force when we pull something or we push something, but fundamentally there are just 4 forces in nature: the gravitational force, the electromagnetic force like magnets and stuff and charges, and the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force, which hold atoms together, which binds atoms together and things like that. So they're just 4. And fundamentally, since everything has to be quantum, these forces must be described by quantum mechanics. One of the problems is that gravitational force has kind of stood aside. It has kind of stubbornly resisted a quantum description of nature. That's one of the things which physicists are working on. But the goal, the holy grail of theoretical physics, if you like, is to try to find a theory, just one theory which explains all the 4 forces of nature. It has not been done so far. So we are kind of stuck at 3 on one side and 1 on the other side. But that's the hope, hopefully.
So we're talking about numbers right here. Nikola Tesla talked a lot about the numbers 3, 6, and 9 in his work and research. Are there significant number sets in quantum physics?
Well, there's a reason, for example, why we have certain things. It has to do with symmetries, the underlying symmetries of nature. So there's some explanation of the numbers, not all. I'm not sure if Tesla's 3, 6, and 9 are directly related to what we have here. But, often there are underlying, we say symmetries or underlying views of nature which predict certain numbers. That's often the case. And that's one of the goals of physics as well, to see why certain numbers are the way they are. Sure.
Okay, so can you just give us a brief understanding of the difference between the computers we are used to and quantum computing?
We know of parallel processors, right? So my computer here probably has 1 processor, but you can have 8, and then 8 of them, work in tandem. They work together. Supercomputers may have, 50 maybe. But you can think of as a quantum computer as like having 1 million processors, or maybe 10 million or 1 billion. Of course, physically, you can't have 1 million processors, right? I mean, million is too many. It will probably occupy this whole city, and then you have power, and it's heating up and all that. It's not practical, right? But quantum mechanics because of entanglement, because it connects every piece with every piece else, it kind of effectively you can think of the number of processors as growing exponentially, really, really. So even within a small quantum computer, it can be this big or whatever, within a reason. But effectively, it could behave as something which has 1 million processors. And if you have 1 million processors, effectively, although we don't actually have 1 million pieces inside, it's quantum mechanics, the miracle of that. You can accomplish a lot of things. For example, factorize large numbers, or in a fraction of a time. Some of the things that classical computers can't do are useful. For example, in e-commerce, like credit card numbers can go from one place to another without being eavesdropped, because you can't do certain things. It'll take infinite amount of time. But with quantum computers, you can do it just like that. So there could be issues, challenges associated with it as well, like security and that kind of thing.
So you've touched on this throughout our interview, but can you just explain or summarize how the quality of life here on Earth will be better improved through the study and implementation of quantum mechanics and physics?
Yeah, well, it's in the end, there is this huge amount of resource that's out there, quantum resource. So it's kind of a resource that's not been tapped, broadly speaking. So anyway, we can tap this, not just a small resource, this huge amount of resource for computation and other stuff. Any amount of resource that can be used, fairly, equitably, and that sort of thing for human, development or growth or happiness is a good thing. I think it's just like another very new kind of resource. It's like another source of energy, if you like, which has never been tapped. So, and it's, as far as I can see, the source is practically infinite. So that's ought to have an effect on, if used properly, of course, on human, betterment, I would say.
Well, Professor Daz, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a good one. Bye.
That was Professor Surya Das from the University of Lethbridge. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.